Welcome to the Behind Beliefs and Behaviors podcast, where we take you on a journey of what is behind the specific beliefs and behaviors that impact individuals and organizations. With our guests, we get to the root cause of what stands in the way of everything from health, wealth, and relationships to leadership, community transformation, and societal progress. From topics on leadership, psychological safety, corporate culture and communication, to parenting, trauma, relationships, personal health, and intimacy, this podcast is sure to get you to the source and provide you practical tips to transform your life one root cause at a time. I am your host, Dr. Maisha Claiborne. I'm a physician, a coach, a consultant, and an expert in trauma-informed communication. The founder of the Mind Remapping Company, I help individuals and organizations better understand the brain, behavior, and the root of false beliefs so that you can more effectively listen, communicate, connect, and create fulfilling relationships and results in your personal and professional life. Join us every Monday morning at 8 a.m. and let's get to the root cause and discover what's behind your beliefs and behaviors. Welcome back to another episode of Behind Beliefs and Behaviors. And I am Dr. Maisha. If you don't know who I am, you should though, because if you've been following this podcast, you know me. I am super excited for today's topic. We are talking about the practice of love in leadership. And this is not a topic that most people really think about. But when I had the opportunity to meet and chat with this sister right here, who I am about to introduce, I just thought there was so much synergy. And I'm very excited. Jasmine Bellamy is the owner and founder of Love One-on-One. She is a love scholar, practitioner, a joyful disruptor, and a business and culture transformer. And today I am so excited to have you on. Jasmine, how are you?
I am wonderful. Thank you so much for having me.
It is my pleasure. Well, so I always like the audience to get to know my guests. So if you would, I would appreciate if you just shared, like, formally who you are, what you do, and really how you came to practice how you practice.
I am the founder of Love 101 and also the Loving Leader, an emerging consultancy, which I'm really excited about. And to your point, it all started from my own love practice. And I know people are like, I don't even know what that means. And so I'm glad you asked. So for me, I define the practice of love as an intentional ordering of your life around love. And so for me, for the past 6 years, that's what I've been doing. And what essentially has happened, and honestly, it is aligned with the beliefs and behaviors because it's what you believe about love that then can shape how you practice. And so for the work that I really started in 2018 was so much about getting clear about what we believe about love.
Yeah.
And understanding that in many ways. One of my favorite quotes from J. Pittman McGehee, who is a Jungian scholar, he says, much of what we call love isn't. And so what that means is we are often shaped and formed and indoctrinated into a belief about love that actually isn't love. I literally was having this conversation with someone yesterday that they described these behaviors. And I'm like, and that's actually not love. And so what Love 101 really set out to do was to really be a study of what love is. And so that for me came through my faith tradition, me really becoming a student of love, understanding what the theology of love is, and also looking across culture, looking through philosophers, looking through poetry, looking through other faith traditions. And all it did was really amplify where I was starting from in my own faith tradition anyway.
Yeah.
And so my question really became, well, what would it look like if I actually put this into practice in my daily life?
Mhm.
And it started for me, honestly, out of a moment of crisis. I had been married 22 years. I'm a mom of two young adults now, 20 and 18.
Mhm.
And I got to a place where I realized what I'm living is not love.
Mm.
And as a responsible mother, what I couldn't do was to allow this presentation to become the foundation of what my children believed.
Mm.
And so I had to take that courageous step to say, this is not a place that I need to be anymore.
Mhm.
And so the whole question about love came to me once I took those courageous steps.
Mhm.
And it one thing that rose up in me was there's love that you have yet to understand. And then the second came a few months after, and it was what would it look like if you actually lived out love the way the creator intended? And I was
Mm.
just like, I'd be a scholar of that. And
Yeah.
that's what I did. I really just committed to becoming a student of love. And so I consider myself a love scholar practitioner, and that I've made love a study.
Mhm.
And not only through a master's of theology, which almost every paper I ever wrote through that 2.5 year journey was about love in some
Right.
way, shape, form, or fashion. So
Right.
I've really looked closely and deeply to what love is and what it looks like, and
Mhm.
what it is to put it into practice. Also, sat at the feet of Bell Hooks, who is, I call her my beloved patron saint and my teacher of love. I've sat at the feet of Howard Thurman. These are all the
Mhm.
people who teach me about love. And so, Love 101 really was about sharing these things that I had been learning with others, because it became very clear to me that this wasn't just about my life.
Yeah.
This was wisdom to be shared with others. And so
Mhm.
Love 101 really just became with me sharing reflections. I wrote every day. I had a very robust writing practice, and I would share publicly the journey
Mhm.
of love. And fast forward to joining Reebok in 2019 and really realizing I'm a retail executive. I've been in the business for 31 years, and I've always been a great developer of people. Like, that's always been positive feedback on my reviews.
Mhm.
But a love practitioner coming to work was a different kind of leader.
Yeah.
And again, it wasn't like I walked in saying, I'm going to be a loving leader today. It was
Yeah.
that love had transformed my life over that time period,
Mhm.
so in such a deep way that I showed up very differently. I showed up understanding myself differently, showed
Mhm.
up looking at the gifts in other people differently. And so I just moved very differently as a leader.
Mhm.
And having been asked to lead some culture transformation work there around United Against Racism and change management, there was no playbook for me other than love. And so it went beyond just me being a loving leader and a manager of the people whose care I was responsible for as a
Mhm.
leader. It was
Mhm.
also how I became an influencer of the entire organization, and what it
Mm.
looked like to hold space and hold a loving space for an
Mhm.
entire organization, and be
Mhm.
able to sit with them in the challenge and also invite them to practice as well. That's how we get to the loving leader, because the loving leader really was using my own lived experience as an executive as a case study. And
Mhm.
so now that's what I'm actually doing from a research and a scholarly perspective in my doctoral program.
Wow. I mean, you have dropped so many pearls just in this introduction. I'm like, so first of all, this quote, like, you have yet to understand
Mhm.
what
Mhm.
love is. Like, it's
Mhm.
so powerful.
Mhm. Mhm.
It's
And when
so
you hear
powerful.
something like that, you don't it doesn't come from you. Like,
Right.
from like it
Yes.
came to me.
Right.
It wasn't like I was so smart and all of a sudden I figured that
And
out.
what a thing to contemplate on a
Yeah.
daily basis.
Yeah. Yeah.
To live life
Mhm.
from you have yet to know what love really is.
Yes.
And that the things that we think are love, the actions are not. And it's
Mhm.
these two things just to contemplate.
Yeah.
And then thinking of, and then I just think it's brilliant how, like, when you came to work as a love practitioner,
Mhm.
how that sort of created the pathway to the loving leader. And this is why it's interesting because the practices that I do are around trust and safety as a foundation for leadership. And oftentimes, trust, safety, emotional intelligence, these things are considered soft skills. And love might be considered one of those things, but you are a whole demonstration to
Mhm.
the importance of developing oneself in these ways,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Because,
Yeah.
like, institutions and companies and policies and procedures and systems are made up of people,
Yes.
right?
Yeah.
And so when
Yeah.
people can bring the practice of love, then they can actually create that trust and
Yes.
create that connection and
Yeah.
create that safety and connect to their innate internal emotional intelligence.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, my premise is that whatever we're producing in a culture of fear is subpar.
Absolutely.
Period. Full stop. Because
Absolutely.
creativity is not unleashed in fear.
Mhm.
And so to me, love is not a soft skill.
Mhm.
It is a friend of mine literally he's been calling my work the revenue of love.
I
And yeah, he's been calling it that. And it's because at the end of the day, this is about value creation that
Mhm.
happens only in synergy and in safety
Yeah.
and trust and
Yes.
places where people feel that they can be their fullest selves and that there are people who are helping to cultivate their truest selves.
Yes.
People who
Yes.
believe in the in innate gifts and talents of the person who's sitting in front of them,
Mhm.
and they are seeing themselves as co-creators of bringing the best of them out. My favorite words these days is being an illuminator. Like the
Mm.
that to me is what real leadership starts to look like when I
Mhm.
can say, "Oh, I see the gift that is in this person, and I'm going to be about the work of fanning their flame,
Mm.
that the ironing, sharpening iron,
Right.
and then I get to rejoice and celebrate with them as they walk into their gifting and bring all their fullest selves to the tables and their greatest gifts." So I don't think that's soft at all.
Oh, no, absolutely, 1,000%. That's why for those who are listening, you may not have caught it in my tone of voice,
Oh no,
but
I heard you.
air quotes for soft. And it 'cause it always raises the hair on my arms when I hear
Me
that. What
too.
this is essential.
It's the hardest work. It is
It
the
is
hardest work, and
essential.
it's because it requires you to do your own inner work,
That's right.
and that's the work that we would much rather not do.
Absolutely. I just think it's, when I think about organizations practicing love and the vision that I get around that, it just I don't even have the words to describe how that feels to be
Mm,
able
mhm.
to, and I imagine for you, like, to be able to bring that to an organization, and then now as a consultancy, to be able to take this and bring it to other organizations, like
Yeah.
what that could look like.
Yeah, yeah. I
What
mean,
the
when I first started having the conversations about what would it look like to be this change agent,
Mhm.
to be a part of transforming this culture so that it's anti-racist, what came to me very early on was about being a joyful disruptor.
Yeah.
And what would it look like to show the marketplace that there's another way of being and to be able to encourage others to do the same. And so I that was always my intention from the very beginning.
Mhm.
And so to now be in this space as a consultant to literally be able to walk alongside leaders and organizations to help them do that is super exciting because that
Yeah.
was always the original vision.
Yeah.
And I just think that there's when you look at the context that we're sitting
Oh
in
gosh.
the midst of an epidemic of mental health and
Mhm.
depression and anxiety and loneliness and all
Mhm.
of these things,
Mhm.
and in my research, it's very clear that these things are very connected to what is
Mhm.
happening at work, and particularly the work of managers. And so for me, I also, if I use the term of Bell Hooks, there's a pervasive lovelessness in
Oh,
the
yeah.
marketplace, and it has been in for centuries. And
Absolutely.
that has produced fruit. it has produced fruit of the harm that is doing to the mental health to people. And so for me, it's a very disruptive move to say,
Mhm.
what if we transformed lovelessness into love? What then could be the fruit? And
Mhm.
so my loving leader framework really is about giving people an on ramp to
Yeah.
start to think about what that could look like and how they could be love in their context.
It's interesting because you said earlier, and I hear it as the background, like what we're dealing with is fear
Yeah.
across the world.
Yeah.
And it's interesting because, like, when you talk about like the work of anti-racism and love, and I've always said that this work, or the, how do I want to say, the culture of the dominant culture, the culture of white supremacism is built on fear
Yes, ma'am.
and scarcity,
And
right?
dehumanization.
And dehumanization. And also all based on fear of what will be lost or fear of what will not be gained. We know that, I believe, and I'm hearing in the background of your conversation, like there's really two emotions. There's two polarities, and that is fear
Yeah.
and it is love.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
when we're not operating in love, we're operating in fear. And
Mhm.
most emotions come
Mhm.
out of fear.
Yeah. Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so it's to look at the work of anti-racism and anti-oppression from this standpoint,
Yeah.
and to look at, well, what is the source of the fear,
Yes.
the lack of empathy, the lovelessness? What is the source of that? I think is a really important conversation to be had, because can be a very powerful emotion that
Yeah.
even can overtake love. And this is the work that people have to do to dismantle their fear and to look what is underneath, what is the root and the source of that, so that they can access the love that's there.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, because the truth is, love is greater than fear. It's more
It really
powerful
is.
than fear.
Mm,
But to your point, it's an intentional counter posture. A colleague of mine, her book is called Life in Flux, or two colleagues of mine, their book is called Life in Flux. And
mhm,
the frame of their book is about there's a common practice and
mhm,
then there's an uncommon posture. And so this
mm.
uncommon posture is love.
Yeah.
Fear is the common practice.
Yep.
But how can we take this uncommon posture of love
Mhm,
and then see what love unleashes? And I think the beauty, I look at love as not just a practice, but also a praxis. And what I
mhm,
have seen is that it has not only changed the context in the culture,
mhm,
and the people in it, it also changed me. And
mhm,
so I changed as I was watching love transform that context. And so it goes beyond what you can ever imagine. And that's the
mhm,
beauty. I think the most important thing, particularly, I love the way you set it up, that there's this fear of loss, that
mhm,
the abundance, the opposite to the scarcity mindset, is that this
mhm.
is not about a zero sum game.
That's right.
That it and it is a win, and it requires effort
Mhm. Yes.
to be able to say, okay, I'm not going to subject myself to just thinking that it's me or them,
Mhm.
that it can be us together,
Yeah.
that we can all win. And so for me, my premise in this work is very much that both people and businesses can flourish. I'm a P&L driver. I always say that all the time. There's nothing in me that's not saying our
Yeah.
business should not be profitable.
Yeah.
I am a business transformer as
Right.
well. But this idea that both the people and the businesses can flourish, and it's really saying that this idea to think that the people don't flourish and the businesses can flourish,
Mhm.
the fruit today tells us that is not.
Yes. Yes. It's interesting when you talk about what was powerful. You said the uncommon practice of love
Mm-hmm.
versus the common practice of fear. And what
Mm-hmm.
occurred to me in that statement was, one of the reasons I feel that the practice of fear is so common is because it was conditioned.
Mm.
And it has been conditioned for hundreds of, maybe thousands of years as the common practice.
Yeah.
And so it creates love as an uncommon practice. And it creates the illusion that fear is the easier way to go, right? So we could say, because for me personally, love is the easier way to go. So for people who where love is the common practice, love is the easier way to go because it just feels better. But for people who are conditioned to fear, which
Mhm.
unfortunately is the majority of people that we're seeing today, love is it requires intention and practice. And
Yeah.
oftentimes when I'm talking to my coaching clients and we're doing the work of reframing and remapping the thought processes, I use the metaphor of if you're hiking on a path that has been well established, then the path is already there for you. And so you're walking down the path, you're walking down the path, and you come to a bifurcation in the path, you're going to walk down the path that feels easiest to you. And so if you've been conditioned for a very long time to lead with fear, then it does become an intentional. I say you get the machete and you have to chop, 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 chop the new pathway and reestablish those neurological connections in the brain to reconnect the internal innate love that you have to a daily practice. And then it becomes easier. And then it becomes a common practice. But as you alluded to earlier, it is the work that most people are not as willing or wanting to do. And guess where
Mm.
that comes from? Fear.
Yeah.
Girl,
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, and I'd say the number one fear often is the fear of heartbreak,
yes. And
right?
yes, that and I feel like it's the fear of heartbreak, and maybe this is saying the same thing, but the fear of discovering so much pain that they're unable to recover. I've heard a lot of
Mm,
when
mhm,
I do
mhm,
the work with of deep trauma work with people, the
mhm,
people who are
mhm.
not ready, they often say, "Well, I'm afraid that I'll find something that I won't be able to I won't be able to recover from, or that I won't
Yeah.
be able to function." And I don't have time for that. Like we're moms and we're parents
Yeah.
and we have to
Yeah.
work, we have to provide. And so I
Yeah.
think that's a real fear too of like such deep pain
Yeah.
that there's no recovery from that.
Yeah. And I want to say that I often get the pushback to love is like this sentimental emotion. And what I didn't realize when I started a love practice and at Love 101, our mantra is love is a daily practice. What we
Mhm.
practice, we become.
Wow.
So we were so aligned when you said daily practice. What I didn't realize is that the practice of love would also be the love that could hold me in the deepest grief.
Absolutely. Wow. That's so
And
powerful.
so for me, they go together. They are held together.
Mhm.
And so I don't, there's nothing lightweight to
Yeah.
me about what love is.
Yeah.
And it is that ability to be able to hold you in the deepest grief. Now, that doesn't mean that we shouldn't also have the support and resources that we need to do that deep work,
Mhm.
but I'm saying that from personal experience for me. It's funny, I'm also a contemplative, and I had to think. Like, I was at a retreat last week, and the question that I got where we were doing in our writing practice was if we could pinpoint to the moment that we knew we had become contemplatives, what brought you to this revelation, so to speak. And for me, when I realized it was actually the grief that was met with love,
Mhm.
and that transformed me. That was the journey to me becoming a contemplative. And
Mhm.
so there's nothing I have lived through very challenging life circumstances that love has transformed me through. And
Yes.
so I just say that to say, but these are the things that when you're in it, you don't understand, which
Right.
I think is also some of the most beautiful things about written about love, is that we don't understand the depth or the width or the
Mhm.
height or the power of love. We don't understand it. And
Mhm.
we often have a limited belief about it. But what I've seen in my own life, in my own transforming work, that it has met me in the deepest grief and heartbreak and pain and unravelings and all the things. And it's the very thing that sets me before you today.
Yeah.
It is a journey for sure. And there's no place I've arrived to by any means. It
Yeah.
is a daily practice still.
Yeah.
But I think part of why I do this work is it is about healing. That is what it's about. And I want that so deeply for people. So my heart breaks with people. I
Mhm.
also walk alongside them And it
Mhm.
is because I also know that I know of the transformative power of love in all of our lives, and
Absolutely.
and that's an invitation for them too.
Absolutely. I'm gonna quote you from our last conversation. You said to me, and I wrote it down, and as you were talking about love meeting you in your deepest grief, I remember this quote is to consider that the reason that we can feel such grief and pain is because we have loved so deeply.
Yes.
And it was such a powerful, even like even saying I just got chills again,
Mhm, mhm,
right? To
mhm,
consider that. And I love what you said. It doesn't mean that we do it without the resources that we need. And I think that's one
mhm,
of the other things, like for myself, and I'm gonna tell you why that was powerful for me is because I have in this season experienced an extreme amount of grief on multiple levels. And as I even if I as I speak, I can feel it.
mhm,
It's in the last maybe 8 weeks or so, lot of loss, but also just the stuff that's going on in the world has just
mhm.
had the grief be very deep. And so that's what that brings to mind is that I grieve because I love humanity so deeply and I love people so deeply, even in my introversion. And one of the things that has assisted me through is those that community that pours love, that is
Yes,
love for me and with me. And I think
yes,
that's so important, which is why as you talk about love and leadership, like this is about community and creating a culture and community where we can be held together in love in profitable organizations.
yeah, yeah, yeah,
And what
yeah,
would that look like? How we would thrive financially when we start to see each other from a place of love and we start to see from a place of abundance.
yes,
How the resources then become grow because we are interacting with each other in and from a different place. So
yeah,
I just really appreciate the space of of love bringing us through grief as an access to also togetherness and
mhm.
what that could look like on a global level.
Yeah, yeah. I think, when we think about uncommon postures, we have such a philosophy of rugged individualism and
Mm,
independence.
mhm,
And I'm speaking specifically to our US American context.
mhm.
And what I know is that love is interdependent.
Yes.
And so again, when it talks about the unlearning to learn what love really is, it
Mhm.
is part of the wrestle sometimes is that how can I learn to take off this thing of independence that
Yeah.
has been pushed on me,
Mhm,
and also say that what does it look like to be interdependent.
mhm.
The vision that I love is like to be woven
Yeah.
into community, to be able to give and to receive.
Mhm.
And those independence is not supportive of those things.
Right.
And so I think that's again a part of the uncommon practice.
Mm,
And when I also say community and the support and the resources that we need, I'm a certified spiritual director. So I walk alongside people with their spiritual questions and the things that they're wrestling with. I also have my own spiritual director and I have my own therapist, right?
yeah,
And I'm
yeah.
also in other communities as well. And so
Mhm.
I do think it is not a, but I also practice silence and solitude.
Yeah.
So all of it goes together in
Absolutely.
terms of what it looks like to create a container
Mhm,
that is about cultivating love. And so again, that pushback against independence
mhm.
and I can do it on my own and I don't need anybody else, right? It's a
Mhm.
pivot to be able to shift and move in this idea that is communal and interdependent.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely, and I think some of that in some of our cultures is also opening up to the idea of receiving just as much as giving, because
Mhm.
there are some I come across a lot, especially in healthcare, who are natural givers, but when it's time to receive, it's like, "Nah." I got this.
Mhm,
Or I
mhm,
don't know how to
mhm,
receive, or it feels so
mhm,
uncomfortable to receive because we've been conditioned not to. We've been conditioned only to give. And
mhm.
I think maybe that even that limiting belief could be behind the resistance of love,
Yeah,
like the
yeah,
loving
yeah,
practice or loving
yeah.
inside of these organizations that are structurally around, there are so what's the word that I want to you may if you know the word, I can telepathically transmit it to you. But like they're so grounded in this binary practice that is
It's
not.
like control and
Thank
self-sufficiency and
you.
all the things, right?
All of
And
those.
so,
I feel it in my body, but I can't
yeah,
produce the words.
all of those things, all of
Yes.
those things. And again, another uncommon practice is humility and right,
Right.
vulnerability,
Vulnerability.
surrender,
Mhm.
acceptance.
Mhm.
Those are all the things that love actually is.
That's right. That's right. That's right. Oh, woo! I knew it. The moment we popped on, I told you, I looked at the title of what we were about to talk about, and I was like, this is about to be a juicy conversation. Oh my gosh, this has been so good. I would love to ask you if there were something that you wanted to leave people with, and particularly even leaders, since I know that you're emerging in consultancy. So for the leaders who are listening, if there's something you wanted to leave them with about the practice of love, what would that be?
Yeah, I'd leave them with a little intro to the Loving Leader framework. And the framework is based on the six letters in the word loving. And so the L is listen deeply,
Mhm.
the O is open, the V is vulnerable, the
Mm,
I is inner work,
mm,
the N is names the reality, and the
mm.
G is gift.
Yes.
And that would be what I'd say. That would be something to just whet the appetite to think about
Mhm.
what would it look like to lead like that.
Woo! I am full, I am full, I am full. This is such this is why I love being a podcaster, because I get to have amazing conversations with amazing people. And
Mm.
sometimes I'm gonna say that this is probably my favorite conversation as a podcaster of all time.
Mm.
Yeah, it really is. It's the first time I've been so moved inside of a podcast. I'm very much, and so I just appreciate you. I appreciate the work that you do. I resonate with the work that you do. I hope and pray that one day we'll get to collaborate on a stage together. I think it would be amazing to be able to do that. And yeah, I just thank you for being with me in this space today.
Thank you. Thank you for the invitation. I appreciate it.
Absolutely. So of course, you got to tell the peoples who are listening, how do they follow you, reach out to you? Like what's the best way for them to get in touch with you if they want to hire you?
Yeah, yeah. There's all kinds of fun things, easy ways to reach me. The website is love101ministries.com. Those of us who are very active on LinkedIn can always easily find me through LinkedIn, Jasmine Bellamy. And those two are probably the easiest ways. But of course, you can follow me on the socials, Love 101 Ministries on Instagram, The Loving Leader also on Instagram, and both of those on Facebook as well.
Awesome, awesome. Well, we'll have all of that in the show notes, people. So go check out Jasmine Bellamy. She's amazing. And I just, again, appreciate you. And also, I appreciate the listeners, because without the listeners, there is no podcast. So thank you all for being with us today. Please share this episode. If you don't do anything, share this episode, share with a friend, share with a family member, share with a colleague, because this is a conversation that needs to be duplicated, that needs to be rippled out. And someone needs to hear this conversation. So please share it. Leave a comment, leave a review. Let the people who are coming after you know how this impacted you. That is so important. Once again, these conversations create ripples. And of course, you know where to find me, always on LinkedIn or mindyourmappingacademy.com. So with that being said, you all have an amazing rest of the day and an amazing rest of the week. And until we see each other again, stay empowered. Thank you for listening to our podcast. We know that without the listeners, there is no podcast. We hope you enjoyed this episode. Please remember to subscribe so you do not miss when we drop our next episode. And share this podcast with a friend, a family member, and a colleague, at least one person in your life today. This episode was brought to you by the Mind Remapping Company, helping organizations create psychologically and emotionally safe cultures that make their employees and leaders feel seen, heard, respected, welcome, and valued, all while fostering a thriving, engaged, and healthy workforce for the organization. Is your organization in need of a speaker? I speak about topics like psychological and emotional safety, trauma-informed communication, and employee well-being. If this is aligned with your organizational inclusion, belonging, or leadership goals, contact me, Dr. Maisha, by going to www.mindremappingacademy.com. That's mindremappingacademy.com. Finally, we train leaders, but we also train coaches. If you're interested in becoming a trauma-informed coach, visit our website as well and check out our NLP coach trainings and certifications. We'll see you on the next episode. Until then, stay empowered.